He was accused of ruining his career by his own son. He threatened to bash a producer's face in front of his daughter. After years of having relationships with the top names in Hollywood, his wife nearly left him. The family of Robert Mitchum is now at last disclosing the sinister secrets they had concealed for many years. This narrative will give you a whole different perspective on the tough man legend, from the startling reality of his jail sentence to the secret foundation no one knew existed. The beginning of Robert Mitchum's life was hardly a Hollywood tale. Heartbreak was the first thing that happened. He was born into a working-class family in 1917 in Bridgeport, Connecticut. To earn a living, his father worked on trains and in shipyards. However, his father passed away in a terrible accident at a train yard in 1919, when Mitchum was just 2 years old. His mother was forced to return to Connecticut and start anew after becoming a widow with 3 children. While working at a newspaper, she wedded a former Navy officer who assisted in raising the children. However, Robert had early indications that he might not follow a typical course. He was crazy. He was always fighting and pushing boundaries. In an attempt to soothe him, his mother finally transferred him and his brother to live on a farm in Delaware. It didn't. At the age of 11, he fled after being dismissed from school. By the age of 13, he and his sister were residing in Hell's Kitchen in New York. That also didn't last. Another fight, another expulsion. Suddenly, Robert Mitchum was on the road permanently. It was during the Great Depression that he turned to drifting full-time. He did odd jobs wherever he could find them, slept beneath bridges and boarded freight trains. He toiled on fields, boxed in back alleys and dug ditches. It was a difficult life. He was starving. He previously nearly lost a limb due to severe injuries. This was more than mere aimless wandering, though. He was molded by these years. He was toughened by them. They gave him life. He also met Dorothy Spence, the woman who would become his wife, when he was recuperating from one accident. Georgia was the source of Mitchum's most contentious story during this period. He said he was put to a chain gang at the age of 14 after being caught for vagrancy. He said that the guards were worse and the work was cruel, and he said he got away. Throughout his life he adhered to the tale regardless of its veracity. His tough guy persona gained credibility from the narrative since it could have truly happened. He had absolutely no aspirations of becoming an actor. However, his sister Julie was performing in a small theatrical company in Long Beach, California in 1937. One evening, an actor failed to appear. They needed someone quickly. Julie gestured toward her brother. Robert took over. That was the accidental beginning of it all. Roles lead to roles. He soon began performing often and even penning children's plays. He was spotted. His mother encouraged him to continue. He even composed music for an Orson Welles-produced charity event in 1939. The Wanderer was becoming an artist without even trying. In B-westerns, Mitchum was frequently punched off a horse by 1943, and he was everywhere on screen. In that year alone, he played the villain in 7 Hopalong Cassidy movies. In addition, he appeared in comedies, war films and everything else they would offer him. He produced 19 films in a single year, working like a machine. He learned how to be present without trying too hard and how to act without acting from that grind. That became as his signature. He secured a deal with RKO Pictures in 1944. They gave him $350 a week, which was small change for a future celebrity. However, they noticed the spark. West of the Pecos was his second major role after Nevada. Despite the fact that both films were minor westerns, Mitchum was unique. His gruff appeal and quiet strength made him feel distinct from the usual Hollywood hero. They were aware that RKO had cheaply shut him up. The tale of G.I. Joe followed. Mitchum portraying a fatigued cop with heart and nuance. War was not glorified in the film. It displayed the dread, the loyalty, and the weariness. He was nominated for an Oscar because of how authentic his portrayal was. Even General Eisenhower praised it as the greatest military film ever produced. Robert Mitchum suddenly transitioned from a cowboy villain to a serious performer. However, Mitchum was conscripted into the army right before the film was released. Art was being imitated by life. He saw no fighting. He spent much of his time making jokes with other soldiers while working as a medic. He was released 8 months later. He returned to discover that he had become a movie celebrity thanks to the G.I. Joe narrative. The studios now wanted him all over. He had the gait of a guy who had seen too much. the voice of a skeptic and the face of a warrior. He was tough. He didn't have to act that way. Mitchum resisted Hollywood's attempts to elevate him. His role as Jeff Bailey in Out of the Past in 1947 did more than simply make him famous. It permanently altered the genre of cinema noir. He wasn't an actor who was loud and theatrical. Rather, he walked slowly, spoke quietly, and gave the impression that he had already seen too much of life. Trouble found him despite his best efforts to flee his background as a former private investigator. Critics characterized him as both confident, slick, and dangerous. He lighted cigarette after cigarette with little apparent concern, which contributed to the character's allure. Later, Roger Ebert claimed that Mitchum was the ideal noir hero because of his weary eyes and sluggish speech. Someone who may blow out at any time yet appeared to be calm on the surface. A generation of performers aspired to emulate him because of his calm, understated approach. Mitchum's career was booming at the same time. After Pursuit and Crossfire performed well in 1947, he rose to prominence at RKO. The studio paid him extra because they knew they had to, doubling his weekly income from $1,500 to $3,000. He had been earning $350 a week just 3 years prior. He was now making about 10 times that amount. The agreement was significant, not just for RKO but also for David Oak Selznick, who had already purchased a portion of Mitchum's contract. Just before disaster struck, Mitchum was in a strong position thanks to this new arrangement. Robert Mitchum was not prepared for it. In 1948, he made $3,000 a week and was riding high on success, making him one of Hollywood's hottest performers. However, everything changed one evening in late August. Mitchum entered a Laurel Canyon home with the intention of unwinding. He was unaware that the residence had been the subject of 8 months of covert police monitoring. In the darkness, officers waited. The location has bugs. The site was picked because it was tucked away, remote from nearby homes, and encircled by forests. This was no accident. Mitchum had unwittingly fallen into the trap that the cops had been planning for months. This was no ordinary drug bust. It was a component of a larger strategy to take action against Hollywood. Other celebrities were also under police surveillance, although the majority received warnings. Mitchum didn't. He didn't resist as the police barged in. He immediately acknowledged it. He said, "I've been smoking marijuana for years. I was aware that I would eventually be caught. I'm wrecked." He had too much honesty. He also didn't hide from the media. He said to reporters, "Yes, boys, I was smoking when they came in." Although it was uncommon, that level of candor also caused the story to take off. The news made headlines all across the world. The movie actor Robert Mitchum was found in possession of drugs. Things quickly deteriorated. A reporter in the jail questioned him about his work. Former actor, remarked Mitchum calmly. He believed it was finished. A psychiatrist undressed him, tied him, and examined him. He had to postpone a National Youth Day speech that same day. Nobody failed to notice the irony. Even while his arrest was already well reported, what happened next made it truly memorable. Mitchum started his 43-day term at a Castex prison farm on February 16, 1949. Although it didn't sound like a rural hideaway, it did. He hardly had time to relax after waking up at 5 in the morning and working all day creating concrete blocks. Being really successful in your profession and completely unknown on the street would be great, in my opinion. That, in my opinion, is the best. Photographers from Life magazine arrived to shoot him milking cows and scrubbing floors while wearing a jail uniform. These pictures were printed all over the place. This was a nightmare for a man who had just received an Oscar nomination. Mitchum, however, remained sane. He said that the other prisoners elected him Mr. Cement Block of 1949 and made a joke about how imprisonment was like Palm Springs, but without the riffraff. The reality was worse, though. The humiliation was not limited to the area. Even showing his movie at the White House was prohibited. Then followed the unexpected turn of events. Rachel and the Stranger was published by RKO Studios just 17 days following his incarceration. It became the studio's biggest hit that year rather than a failure. Not a single person ignored Mitchum. They came in droves to see him. In actuality, Blood on the Moon, his subsequent movie, was also a hit. Even more alluring was his tough, cool persona. which was now tinged with controversy from real life. Mitchum started his 43-day term at a Castaigne prison farm on February 16, 1949. Although it didn't sound like a rural hideaway, it did. He hardly had time to relax after waking up at 5 in the morning and working all day creating concrete blocks. Photographers from Life magazine arrived to shoot him milking cows and scrubbing floors while wearing a jail uniform. These pictures were printed all over the place. This was a nightmare for a man who had just received an Oscar nomination. Mitchum, however, remained sane. He said that the other prisoners elected him Mr. Cement Block of 1949 and made a joke about how imprisonment was like Palm Springs, but without the riffraff. The reality was worse though. The humiliation was not limited to the area. Even showing his movie at the White House was prohibited. Then followed the unexpected turn of events. Rachel and the Stranger was published by RKO Studios just 17 days following his incarceration. It became the studio's biggest hit that year rather than a failure. Not a single person ignored Mitchum. They came in droves to see him. In actuality, Blood on the Moon, his subsequent movie, was also a hit. Even more alluring was his tough, cool persona, which was now tinged with controversy from real life. Robert Mitchum's success in Hollywood wasn't sudden. Love was one of the many rules he disregarded. His family was separated by a choice he took long before the flashing cameras and crimson carpets. Dorothy Spence wasn't just any girl when he first met her as a youngster. She was seeing John, his brother. Robert was not deterred by that. Still, he followed her. Dorothy was just 20 years old when they were married in 1940. John declined to attend the wedding since it was so heated. He refused to even go to family gatherings when Robert was there for years. Dorothy, however, remained at Robert's side despite his frequent disappearances, the scandals, and the betrayals. She remained for 57 years till his passing in 1997. Robert continued to cause trouble though. He became associated with Ava Gardner when My Forbidden Past was being filmed in 1951. It was more than a passing fancy. Ava wanted more. She even requested a chance with Robert over the phone with Dorothy. She said, "You've had him for 10 years. Give it to someone else." Dorothy didn't flinch. "No," is the response. Mitchum remained wed. The liaison came to an end. The film was a failure. Eventually the controversy subsided, but his reputation as a bad kid only got stronger. In 1954, River of No Return followed. Mitchum had known Marilyn Monroe long before she became famous, when she was still Norma Jean, and he had worked with her husband at Lockheed. They were both stars now. Rain, injuries, and Monroe's arguments with the director made the filming difficult. Mitchum hurried to her aid when she injured her ankle in the river. Some claim that they became too close. Envious, Monroe's husband Joe DiMaggio flew in. Rumors are quick to spread. Monroe never forgot Mitchum, but he never abandoned Dorothy. Later on, she referred to him as one of her favorite co-stars. Shirley MacLaine was added to the list in 1962. Since she was little, she had a crush on Mitchum. Things soon became amorous after they featured in Two for the Seesaw. They traveled together from London to Paris to West Africa while keeping quiet. 3 years passed at that time. Both couples believed they were being covert when they stumbled across Marcello Mastroianni on a London street, but everyone knew. Shirley eventually returned to her husband. Mitchum went back to Dorothy. However, not even the Caribbean was able to calm things down. He had a liaison with Rita Hayworth while filming Fire Down Below in Trinidad. She was over retirement age, suffering and elderly. There was genuine fire between them. Their co-star Jack Lemmon sensed it. Hayworth and Mitchum were attracted to one another, both on and off screen. The wild intensity of their time together was mirrored by her famous carnival dance performance. She was dying beneath her attractiveness though. Early symptoms of disease and alcohol were already beginning to appear. Although passionate, Mitchum's affair with her was also depressing. Despite his best efforts, Mitchum was unable to save her since she was no longer Gilda. Robert Mitchum didn't appear to be the type of person who pleaded for parts or sought accolades. Like a man who knew exactly who he was, he strolled through Hollywood. A fearless, tough, and cool person. Mitchum didn't play it safe when he played Reverend Harry Powell in Night of the Hunter. He researched actual murderers who killed widows and children in the name of religion, such as Harry Powers. While practicing eerie songs in his quiet, lethal preacher's voice, Mitchum shut himself in his dressing room. At lunch he wouldn't even behave out of character. According to the crew, Powell seemed to be around all the time. In an attempt to understand what type of person could kill while smiling and holding a Bible, he even looked at pictures of murder victims. It was successful. Powell had a sense of reality, too authentic. Mitchum experienced hell once more, this time literally, when he portrayed Max Cady in Cape Fear years later. Despite being 45, he had boxer-like training. Every day 1,000 push-ups. The 30 pounds are gone, just muscle. He desired to be frightening. He was too. In order to remain inside Cady's warped psyche, he would avoid everyone and wander the set half-naked with angry eyes. He severely cut his hand on set during one scenario. There is blood everywhere. He didn't stop though. Polly Bergen, who also was coated in blood, didn't. They continued until they had to be forcefully separated. Acting was not the only source of tension on site. Years later, Gregory Peck, who portrayed the nice guy, said that Mitchum had frightened him. He was constantly being teased by Mitchum, who altered his line delivery while maintaining his persona and never letting him unwind. Before filming the river sequences, Mitchum would starve himself in order to increase his aggression. To get away from him, Peck even requested that some portions of the script be changed. It wasn't a phony terror that you see in his eyes on film. Ryan's daughter followed. Mitchum had to portray a kind, unassuming Irish instructor. There was only a guy quietly suffering, no violence, no rage. However, the position required more of him than the majority of his tough guy roles. He spent 4 months honing his Irish accent in the area. He rehearsed daily, worked with fishermen, and listened to cassettes until the villagers were in disbelief. The notoriously meticulous director David Lean tested Mitchum's limits. 83 takes were needed for one poignant scene. At last, Mitchum lost his temper and hurried away, claiming that collaborating with Lean was like constructing the Taj Mahal out of toothpicks. However, he returned the next day, perfected the moment in a single shot, and brought everyone on set, including Lean himself, to tears. In order to get into the mindset of a small-time criminal with little left, Mitchum purposefully aged himself, gained over 30 pounds on beer and donuts, removed his dentures, and slept in a beat-up automobile during the filming of Friends of Eddie Coyle. He was also mistaken for one of the local crooks. He refused to allow his face to be touched by the cosmetics artists. He desired for every crease, shade, every trace of aging to be seen. He was no longer only acting. Eddie Coyle was his name. By the 1980s, things were changing in Hollywood. The majority of aging performers clung to whatever movie roles they could obtain while younger stars took control. However, Mitchum took a risk that nobody anticipated. He went to watch TV. He portrayed a naval commander who observed World War II while history was being made. He accepted a wage reduction and placed all of his money on the program succeeding. It was worthwhile. There were more than 140 million viewers. At the time, it was the most viewed miniseries. And Mitchum was back on the map, in newspapers, on posters, and on televisions. When everyone believed he was done, he had remade himself. While filming in Trinidad and Tobago in 1956, Mitchum developed a deep affection for calypso music. Instead of him, most actors would have just portrayed visitors. He began creating his own songs after paying careful attention and meeting actual legends like Lord Melody and Mighty Sparrow. In 1957, his album Calypso Is Like So was released. It wasn't just a haphazard side project for a superstar, it was real. He had perfected the beat, the accents, and even the lingo. What about the songs? All of them were written by him. Sales of the record were strong, and Capitol Records even revived it with Thunder Road, one of his subsequent hits. Frank Sinatra reportedly remarked that Mitchum was more knowledgeable about music than the majority of experts he had ever encountered. But it didn't end with music. Mitchum was a poet as well, not some scrawled poetry by Hollywood stars, either. Actual intricate and individualized work. He began writing in 1939 and continued for over 60 years. It wasn't widely known until 2001, 4 years after his passing. His daughter-in-law discovered more than 200 poems in old notebooks at that time. On set, some were penned over long nights, others during his brief incarceration in 1948. He wrote on love, time, death, and fame. Even the harshest detractors were shaken by a poem he composed the night Marilyn Monroe passed away. In between those somber poems, he even experimented with hard literary forms, villanelles, sestinas, and other things you wouldn't expect from a man who earned a profession by throwing fists on TV. Were private letters of love to Dorothy, his wife. No one ever saw that side of him. Then there is the aspect of his life that was kept a secret while he was alive. He established the Dur Foundation in the early 1950s, while remaining anonymous by using his middle name. After a young stuntman was injured, he built a burn treatment facility at Children's Hospital Los Angeles and gave millions to children's hospitals around California. That institution assisted children for over 30 years, and nobody knew Mitchum was the one who funded it. He assisted veterans as well. Following his role in G.I. Joe, he developed a strong bond with actual troops. He discreetly covered the rent and medical expenses for homeless World War II and Korean War veterans from the middle of the 1940s until the end of his life. Additionally, he established a college fund for the children of injured troops during 2 USO tours in Vietnam. That foundation helped more than 200 kids graduate, and Mitchum never requested credit. Despite his reputation as a fearsome character on television, Robert Mitchum had a convoluted personal life. Despite being chilly and aloof, he was incredibly loyal. His affection was present even if he didn't always express it verbally, in unusual silent ways. Although he didn't often give his children hugs, Mitchum would hover at the mailbox and act indifferent as he inquired about his son Jimmy's daily absence of letters. He raced to help his son Chris when he believed he was drowning, but he missed the pool and passed out. Chris simply shrugged and inquired as to why he did it, as though such disorder were commonplace. Mitchum also spent hours sitting on the floor mending damaged model airplanes and, because his daughter Patrine enjoyed it, he took her on long trips to gaze at the ocean. He cared like a parent, even if he didn't always behave like one. However, it wasn't easy being the son of Robert Mitchum. His second child, Christopher, had to learn that lesson the hard way. He got off to a great start in Hollywood, earning prizes and co-starring with John Wayne. Then, all of a sudden, nothing. The casting directors refused to even look at him. At last, one of them told him the truth. He was untouchable since he had collaborated with Wayne. Rumor had it that Robert had subtly ruined his son's career out of fear of what fame would do to him. It hurt. But Christopher never received a direct response. Without ever stating it out, Mitchum could have restricted his son's destiny by attempting to protect him from the worst aspects of Hollywood. In 1965, his relationship with James, his eldest son, reached a breaking point. James felt he had had enough of Robert's heavy drinking, which had been going on for days. He cornered his father at their property and produced medical records. Mitchum initially made a joke about having 2 kidneys, but then it hit home. His first real effort at sobriety began that evening. It was a unique moment when the child became the parent, but it didn't stay long. Mitchum listened as well. He would check himself into the Betty Ford Center years later. However, that encounter with James was the first weakness. Mitchum was serious when it came to his daughter. His lone girl, Patrine, was zealously guarded by him. A producer approached too closely during a gathering in Hollywood. In the restroom, Mitchum surrounded him, seized his lapels, and threatened to reorganize his face so drastically that his identity would require dental records. It was not an act. To keep Patrine near, he brought her around on movie shoots, even when she was a newborn. Even if it meant hauling bottles and diapers into Canada's wilderness, he wanted her safe. His deeds were loud, yet he seldom spoke much. Dorothy, his wife, witnessed everything. Before he became well known, before the scandals, before his relationships with women like Rita Hayworth and Ava Gardner, she had been there from the beginning. For years, she tolerated it. But she reached her breaking point in 1970. She issued him divorce papers at their Maryland home and threatened to depart unless he sought treatment. He was taken aback. She had persevered through grief, publicity, and jail time. She was finished now. Mitchum remained silent. He just stated that he couldn't live without her even if he didn't deserve her. It rattled him, but it didn't make anything better. Things improved for a time. Mitchum's health was deteriorating by the time the 1990s arrived. He smoked 3 packs a day since he was in his teens. Lung cancer was discovered by physicians in 1997. He was already struggling with emphysema at the age of 79. He declined any significant medical care. Painkillers were sufficient. Like he lived, he wanted to pass away on his terms. Dorothy, his wife, accompanied him at all hours. In his crazy existence, she was the only thing that was constant. The residence has been occupied for the last month. Christopher, one of his children, who hadn't talked to him in years, arrived. They spoke quietly, and for a long time. Just closure, please. Even former co-stars made an appearance. Deborah Kerr, his favorite starring actress, and Jane Russell, his lifelong companion. It was an odd, serene conclusion to a life that had never been quiet. Mitchum had no desire for a lavish Hollywood farewell. He detested fakery. In Santa Barbara, only 30 people, mostly close friends and family, gathered in silence. It was just the way he desired. No flash, no noise. However, there was one final dispute even in death. Mitchum had requested cremation. Near the spot where he liked to sail, his wife wished to disperse his ashes at sea. There were family members who didn't agree. One person even proposed dividing the ashes. Dorothy quickly put an end to that. Ultimately, Jane Russell and her family were present as his ashes were dispersed off the coast. When Dorothy passed some years later, her ashes were dumped in the water with his.